And sorry, you've somehow ended up on mute. So I've just asked you to unmute. We heard you say hello, but if you'd like to start from there.
Okay, I'm unmuted now, right? You can hear me?
Yes, can hear you now.
Super. Well, what would an event be these days without a tech glitch up front? So let's start again. Hello, everybody, and a warm welcome to you all. I'm Anne Franke, the Chief Executive of the Chartered Management Institute and the Women's Leadership Forum Advisory Board member for Europe. I'm also your host tonight. I spent almost 14 years at Procter & Gamble in the UK and Germany, and I'm delighted to recognize many of those you who've joined us and equally pleased to welcome those whom I don't know. An amazing over 750 of you have signed up for this celebration of high impact women and men promoting gender equality, featuring over a dozen super talented alumni. You can check out their bios and more in our program, which will be posted in the chat and was in your joining up email. I wanted to just take a moment to share a little bit of background as to how this came about. About a year ago, I had the great pleasure of hearing Alison Kirkby speak at the UK P&G chapter alums event, and we reconnected. We spoke with some of the other women at the event, and we started thinking, wouldn't it be a lovely idea to host an event that celebrated the many contributions that P&G women are making in so many different forms of leadership. Now, hats off to the mega CEOs like Alison, who are super role models to us all. But there are many other forms of leadership, such as entrepreneurship, investors, CEOs of nonprofits, board members, authors, advisors, and thought leaders. And of course, it's not just women, but also many men across the P&G alums who help make a difference here. So in line with the Women's Leadership Forum vision of high impact women and men who promote gender equality, we're celebrating them in this event tonight. Since then, of course, we've had COVID, and the stats show us that women have been hit harder, even harder by this crisis, along with ethnic minorities and young people. So the topic's even more important. But there is also an important aside. Tonight, women are super well represented in our speakers, but we know we have some way to go before we get better representation of ethnic minorities, and we do need to do a better job here. Now, when I reached out to those I know on LinkedIn to ask them if they would either speak or help organize this event, the amazing thing was everybody said yes, pretty quickly. And I think that speaks volumes and is a huge testimony about the shared values, bonds, and the stickiness of the P&G community. I've been so privileged to have known or worked with almost all of the speakers at this event when I was at P&G, and to work with many of you since in my capacity as CEO of the Chartered Management Institute. And it's been great reconnecting with all of you as we've organized this event, and a real energizer in trying times. Now, of course, the speakers and organizers themselves have helped to promote this event and bring together such a large and accomplished audience. Several P&G alumni were involved in pulling this together. A big thank you to Steve Gray from the UK Alumni chapter, to Ottmar Debold from the German DACH chapter, and to Jasper Wiegand from the Geneva and Global P&G alum board, as well as to Luann Eckert-Lynch, the Women's Leadership Forum, or WLF co-chair. This event has been a real testimony to collaboration and teamwork. So thank you to everybody. We've got an amazing agenda lined up for you. It's in the chat, but I'm going to share it up here. If we could see that agenda, please. So we will open with a panel of gender balance champions, which will include Paul Pullman, Jane Wakely, and Luisa Delgado. This will be followed by the WLF chairs, Luann Eckert-Lynch and Deborah Bass, getting your input into what you'd like to see more from the Women's Leadership Forum in the future, before we hear two very high flyers in conversation with each other who once worked together as sponsor and sponsee, Chris De La Puente and Alison Kirkby. And then we'll move into 30-minute workshops on the how-tos from those many diverse leaders I mentioned in the start, with a fabulous lineup of interactive sessions on everything from how to start a successful business, to how to be board ready, be a thought leader, or to succeed in advancing gender equality in the C-suite. You can sign up for more than one if you like. The links are in the chat, and they're also in your sign-up email. And we'll close with some optional networking. If you have questions, please use the Q&A function. It's separate from the chat. And actually, please do check the chat often. You'll see that the agenda is there, the program is there, the links for the workshops are there, and you can comment or say hi to your many friends and colleagues. And of course, we also all hope you sign up and join P&G alums and the WLF if you're not already a member. So thank you so much for joining us and enjoy. And now, if I could move to our first panel event, Gender Balance Champions. Joining me are Paul Pullman, the CEO and founder of Imagine, the former CEO of Unilever, and one of the original founders of the UN's He for She. Jane Wakely, the lead CMO of Mars, and Louisa Delgado, an investor, a portfolio board member on the board of IKEA, AO World, and others, and an ex-CEO of a major optical company, Safilo. Welcome to all of you. Thanks for joining us tonight. Now, of course, you're all known champions of gender balance and equality. And I'd like you to share, what's your biggest achievement in this area? Maybe what's your top tip, and maybe what's the toughest barrier you've had to overcome? Jane, if I could start with you. Oh, Jane, you're on mute. You're on mute, that phrase of 2021.
Sorry, has to happen, doesn't it? Thanks, Anne. Good evening, everyone. It's really lovely to connect with so many P&G alumni again. So look, I work for Mars Inc. and I think it's always important to celebrate progress. So we're proud of progress, things like having pay equity, things like being recognized with a rating of 100% from the Corporate Equality Index in the US, from the Human Rights Campaign Foundation. But the reality is, progress isn't sufficient, and we're very, very far still from our goals. So for example, you know, we've committed that we want 100% of our leadership teams to be gender balanced. And at the moment, we're at about 43%. So as I reflect on, you know, what we've learned in that journey, and we've learned from the progress, but we've learned from also the challenge, I think it's a combination of actions. On the one hand, you've got the big, bold, systemic actions that raise the floor of the whole company. But my real tip, it's also on the individual actions. And I think I've been super inspired to meet very many role models in our business who just decide to act on the thing closest in their sphere of control. And by making those actions, not needing big policy, it begins to create momentum towards the big goals. So on the big, bold vision, you know, let's take 100% gender balanced leadership teams. Like any business strategy, you know, what it comes is you set your vision, you set a target, you measure, you really course correct when you're off track. And I think the big tip I'd have there is what we don't do enough on some of these issues is really listen to the root cause of the issue. So we just launched a big initiative called Here to Be Heard. And it's amongst internal associates, but it's also amongst women right throughout our supply chain to speak up and to share what's holding them back, what they think needs to be different. And of course, it's inclusive of men too. And some of the bold initiatives we're sort of taking that I'm most proud of are things like gender equality on parental leave. So however you come to be a parent, whatever your gender choice, every associate, for example, in the UK Mars has the right to equal parental leave, 52 weeks leave, 26 weeks, paid at 90%. And those bold innovations that really push the agenda and really seek to address the root cause of gender equality, I think are amazing. But on the other hand, as I said, it's the individual personal actions. And I want to tell a little story about one of my personal heroes at Mars called Fiona Dawson. Because for me, she's role modeled. Yes, she champions the big, bold strategy and the big, bold innovation, but she also takes those really important individual decisions that break the norm, that break the unconscious bias. And the one I'd like to tell is I'll never forget when we first, we did a panel together and we were appointing a marketing VP for the UK. And basically there was an outstanding candidate, but she was crystal clear. She only wanted to work 3.5, maybe 4 days a week. And in those days, the company policy was absolutely, no, for those big jobs, you had to be highly visible, highly available. Fiona was the one that championed, we were better off to appoint Mitch because she was going to make the biggest difference. And she put her own reputation on the line that let's measure the performance, let's make it work, and let's make it happen. And for me, it's those individual heroic actions that also are vital in driving change. So
thank you so much for that, Jane. And actually, Paul, there's a lot of themes there that are going to resonate with you. And, you did a lot of this at Unilever some time ago, or perhaps a bit of a pioneer. Can you share your reflections?
Well, thanks, Anne. And it's obviously an honor to be on the panel with Jane. I work a lot with Grant, and Mars is a great company. And then with Louisa also. Louisa and I were both partners in crime in Europe when we were driving diversity. And it's a real pleasure to see you. It's also one of my first reappearances at a P&G alumni event. For some reasons that I've forgotten, I was absent for the last 10, 12 years and had a great time. But it is great to connect and see friends like Otmar and all the others back on the screen. It looks like I'm the only one that got older when you guys are all staying young. So I should have retired from P&G probably and not hop around other companies. Anyway, I'm in the Netherlands right now because my 92-year-old mother unfortunately got a stroke. And I was just telling her that I was in this event. But it also dawned on me how grateful I am and obviously how much I have to thank my mother for where I am and who I am and the possibilities that were given to us. She actually was a teacher, but when she started to get children in the early or mid-50s, she had to stop working. That were the norms in those days. But she insisted that we do our homework and that we make things, strive to the highest level of performance. And reflecting on her life and seeing her there as a proud woman, I think there's no better testimony than dedicating this podcast, at least from my side, to her. I don't have many achievements that I would be personally proud of because I think that many of the things that have been achieved are actually because they have been distributed achievements. I firmly believe, and the reason why I fight for LGBT or for the rights of people with disabilities or for gender is not that I like one or the other. It is just that I firmly believe that society can only function if we defend the basic values of dignity and respect for everybody, equity, compassion. And the moment, as we've seen in some of the political leaders, we start violating these basic values, we undermine bit by bit actually the future of humanity. So this is a bigger issue than just gender balance, if you want to. At Unilever, the first thing I did when I came in, unfortunately, I found a board without gender balance and an organization that had about 38% of gender balance in the company. We immediately changed our board to a 50-50 gender balance, but also racial. We had 2 people from Africa, 2 from China, and the gender balance was immediately achieved. And that made such a difference. It changed the conversations in the board, but it also gave us the courage and direction to work it in the company. And over a 10-year period, which was exactly my tenure as CEO there, we moved the gender of management at all levels actually from 38% to 50%. And I don't think still there are many companies that have achieved that. And it's a shame. It's a shame. I think some of the things that I believe in is that gender balance is not in your office or in your own environment or in your department. It is in everything you do in life, which also means it is in your value chain. If you don't bring it into what some people might call scope 3 instead of scope 1 and 2, if we compare it to climate change, you won't get there. We were ensuring that we would create 2.5 million jobs for women in our value chain, that the supervisors on our tea plantations were as many women as men, that we had suppliers which fairly represented this equality as best that we could. So the gender lens has to go into everything. You cannot bifurcate it and celebrate one thing, but then terribly fall short on the other. That is an important thing. The second thing is that, you have to work on things, I believe, to be credible as leaders that go beyond your self-interest. Everybody can make the case that your company would be more profitable, that it's good for your shareholders, that a more diverse company is more creative. But frankly, important as it may be, I think you are really a leader if you start working on the broader changes. And what I've especially liked is the work we've done with UN Women, the work we've done to unstereotype things in advertising, the work we've done with farmers in the value chain where most of the poverty is, the work we've done on developing the Sustainable Development Goals, and not only having goal number 5 in there of gender balance, but permeating through all of the 17 goals. And now, obviously, in COVID, we're working on ensuring that more disproportionate attention goes to women and girls which have suffered. So my very simple tips in one sentence, Anne, if I may, is set bold targets for sure, as Jane was saying, but build your gender lens in everything you do. Then it's not about gender balance. It's actually about these values, which is racial inequality of disability, gender. You can't pick one or the other and be seen as sincere. And then finally, get it embedded in the behaviors in your cultures, but it starts with yourself.
Some really great advice there and a really integrated and holistic approach. Now, Louisa, you've had what you've described as a mosaic career, done C-suite, investor, board. What are some of your experiences on this topic?
Well, first of all, thank you, Anne. It's a real great pleasure to be here. Also, I have not been in the P&G circuit, I think, since 2007. No, 12, actually, I think. And I'm really delighted to see a lot of familiar faces and a series of them whom I got to know well exactly in diversity work. Paul, more than diversity, but diversity for sure, but also many others. And it's interesting to see, you know, how the world has moved on and how many things have stayed the same. I think that's perhaps one of the insights, which is particularly true, I think, for diversity. Many of the conversations continue to be exactly the same as in 1998 that I would have had with Claude Meyer when I started to be his diversity guru. And I have no idea what qualified me for that beyond being a woman, but I learned enormously, and I'm sure we'll be talking about this later. I think my key insight, to build on what Jane and Paul said and add on something new, I think my key insight on diversity as a topic of values and of approach is that it is about seeing the unique differences that a diverse set of people can make. It's not about gaps, but difference is a plus, not a minus. And therefore, when difference is a plus, it brings in some more than the sum of its parts. And I think this is very important. I'd like to actually dedicate this event to the mountains. I'm here in St. Moritz, deeply snowed in. I come from the mountains, and I think what I learned from the very beginning, being from the mountains, is when you hike and when you want to go up the Pitzpalu, that differences don't matter anymore, because you have to rely on each other, man, woman, old, young, foreigner, not foreigner, you name it. And I think there is something to that. You know, we all are marked by where we come from. And in that sense, you know, for me, it has always been about equal partners on a mission. And whether that mission is a business undertaking or whether it's something else in life, that is the important thing. And each of us brings something unique to it. I have dedicated myself in the past 30 years in cross-fertilizing insights, many of them that stem from P&G, where I spent most of my time, but moving them from consumer goods into technical IT, SAP, for example, then moving it into optical, into fashion, my other job. Then as I moved into chairing and being a board member, into other areas, and latest in banking and private equity and investing, you know, in startups with venture capital. And it is fascinating how rich that cross-fertilization actually can be, how reapplicable many of the insights are, and how each of these industries has added on an insight that I think has made my approach to gender diversity richer, broader. And I would summarize it probably under the heading of, nowadays, gender diversity is not a program to make, you know, to develop more women into senior positions. That's a minute, small part of it. It is about how you look at the role of business today. What is its role in society and in value creation? And if you create value for all stakeholders, aka ESG, there is an immediate role for gender diversity, among other sorts of diversity, in creating value for all stakeholders. And once you're there, I think, a lot of the confusing conversation of 30 years ago is not needed anymore, because, you go to the heart and the purpose of business and a particular company. In that sense, for me, the conclusion is very much that, diversity is part of a sustainability agenda, and the sustainability agenda, in my view, is powered nowadays by digital and there I get to the values that Paul was talking about, humanism. And I think humanism is something at IKEA, we talk about it. We talk about human-centered design. We talk about humanistic digital days that we're just having these 3 days here. I think that word, we shouldn't be afraid of really putting it in there, using it, and being clear what it can mean for each of us and for all our businesses.
So again, some great points and drawing out to humanism. But, sometimes you have to start somewhere. And if I can inject a little of my own experience, I had actually gender balance very early in my career at P&G and in the UK and Germany. And as I became more senior and became the one and only woman on an ex-cohort board, I found that I did feel a bit other. I did therefore what many women do, and ended up pivoting my career, perhaps because of my values, into social enterprise. And, the irony is that CMI is all about many of the values that you spoke about, and about making people simply better line managers, turning accidental managers into conscious leaders. And really, that's what you're all saying that we all need to be. And I think that was something that P&G inherently understood and invested in. And I do think that gender balance aids that. So a couple of things we've done, CMI advised the government on measuring the gender pay gap, because we all know as business people, what gets measured gets done. And we particularly advise them to look at the percentages of women at every level of their organization, and some of the gaps, not only in pay, but bonuses. And some of the behaviors and values that you've all advocated really do start to become easier when you see what percentage you have. As Paul said, one of the first things he did was change things. So although I think it's absolutely vital that we do branch out into values, my own experience has been actually, whatever it is, it's a combination of measurement as well as those very solid values that really do matter. And I think that's also just an important point, is you've mentioned the business case here. There's an enormous business case for diversity and inclusion, gender as well. And we shouldn't forget that, because the data is overwhelming. Gender balance benefits everybody. So you've mentioned P&G and some shared experiences, that it's something that bonds us together. Was there a moment in your P&G career when you realized, that this kind of value-centric and inclusive approach to leadership? And if so, maybe you could share that with us. Maybe there's a story there. Louise, I'll start with you.
I think the seminal moment, as you just called it, Anne, I think was the sum of a series of moments. Over almost 22 years, it's not one or the other. It's the sum that you don't realize when you're in it, but when you step back a few years later, you can actually see the total picture. And the moments are some extraordinary, insightful moments. Then there might be one or the other extraordinarily painful moment as well. And then one or the other funny one. So very quickly, I'll mention one of each really quickly. I think on the tremendously insightful ones, I think are probably two. I think the approach we took at the time, it was mid-90s, in really understanding why don't we have women. This was the time when there were no women beyond group managers, and the group managers were the laudable exceptions here and there. so a long time ago. And I think using our consumer-focused approach, data approach, quantitative and qualitative focus groups, and I was sent off to interview women across all EMEA who were and were not anymore with P&G. And I think that insightfulness of that exercise stayed with me since ever, because you would really find very technical barriers, flexibility in work arrangements and others. You would find very subtle barriers, very style and perception and interpretation of style type of areas. And solutions would be, as usual, in the consumer himself or herself, if you care to extrapolate what you really learned. So that always gave me an approach that's fact-based, very deep, very insightful, and then extracting things, and that stayed with me. The sad moment, or maybe more difficult one, was insights on how unchecked power works against gender diversity in terrible ways. And I will never forget a court case in the US where I was the key witness. That stayed with me very deeply when the judge asked me, why do you think this happened in a company like P&G? And I thought that was a moment of truth for me, and I'm sure also for everybody else who was in the courtroom. And then the funny ones, I mentioned Claude Maillard, and I do it with a lot of care and good memories, but he had never made a presentation on data on women representation, nor anything to do with women. We're talking here 97, I think, or 98. And it was very interesting when he looks to me and says, oh, this is just like getting to know a consumer study, isn't it? And I said, absolutely. There's nothing else more mystified about us than, we are like consumers. You just need to get to understand what makes us tick. And I thought that was lovely, and it stayed forever with me. The other one is Paul. I think once, Paul, in our quest in Europe, once we said, you get what you measure and what you reward, I think so much changed. That's it from my side.
So that's great. So we do want to have time for questions. So we're coming up to about 13 minutes left of our total time. So I want to ask Paul and then Jane really quickly, maybe your seminal P&G story, and really have a time for a couple of questions from our audience. So Paul?
Yeah, no, thank you, Louise. And it obviously reflects your work that you did then. But my moment, perhaps, I don't know if there was a moment like Louise, you form yourself continuously, and I'm still working on that. But the one thing that came to mind most strikingly as I heard you talk was actually in Newcastle. I'd come from Spain, not known to be a gender-friendly country in the 90s when I was working there. And I moved to Newcastle, and two things happened to me. Replacing my clasper, I got involved in the community activities. And I felt that was a moment that I moved from being a half person, self-centered, career, results, playing the corporate game, to a full person. It was the first time that I saw second generation unemployment, shipbuilding, coal, steel, all had gone belly up. And we would meet people and see them, and in all the cities along the coast, that the only thing a girl could get when she was 14 or 15 years old was pregnant and have a baby. It was all the complications coming out of that. So it really made me realize of how we really need to work hard as a company. And we were the biggest employer there on the River Tyne, how we need to ensure that it's working for everybody. And then my management board, they were super, incredible experience, fun, professional, but they were all male. They all belonged to the male-only golf club, things I'd frankly never seen in my life, but it still existed up north. So you had this dichotomy of inclusion with separation. Business doing well, but it could never do well in the long term if we were not better reflecting that society. So what I liked about P&G, I have to say, is the rigor, the targets, the comprehensiveness of the plans, but you can only win if you do it with the heart and with the head. And as Louise knows, there's only one time in my life I refused a bonus, because when we made so much progress in Europe, A.G. Lovely came and said, we have to reward you. You've done a great job. Gender diversity has been advanced. Here is some money. And I said, I'm not taking this, because you will never get there if you buy off with money what we should be doing in the first place as being right. We should actually fire the people that don't do it. And that concept, I think, took a long time for P&G to understand. If you truly want to change the behavior and the values, you don't reward what we all need to do. You get rid of the people that after a certain time and with all your tools don't get it. It's perhaps a little bit harsh, but it is effective, I can tell you. And this is what we did at Unilever.
So that's an amazing story. And I know when I interviewed you for my book, you shared that story. And I think it's an incredibly powerful anecdote. And you're right. I agree with it. Jane, what is your experience? Can you share your story?
Yes, well, my seminal moment was the day I left P&G, I think, because I was very privileged, honestly, in my young career. I was in a very dynamic part, a very diverse part of P&G at that time, health and beauty care, and there were tremendous female role models all around me, including you, Anne. And also tremendous leaders. I worked for Gavin Patterson, Tim Penner, who really championed diversity and put that at the heart of the values. So honestly, I think I was one of those women who, in Gill Whitty-Collins' recent book, Why Men Win at Work, she called out women who deny there's an issue. And I think, honestly, as I grew up in P&G, I didn't recognize there was an issue in my early stages of my career. And it wasn't till the day I left. And I did join Mars, which is a wonderful company. But I realized on my first week at Mars, I'd asked all the wrong questions about diversity, because I'd asked things like, what's your policies? What I didn't realize is the day I landed, and I remember, Anne, it was in a room with you in Brussels. I think it was the top 80 leaders in Europe. And I was one of 4 women in the room. And, look, it's a tremendous experience we've built over time. But I think, it was through some of that experience and through stopping being self-centered, but also looking out into other industries, really working with our agency partners, working with our value chain, Paul, as you said, right to the farmers, our cocoa farmers, our rice farmers, and understanding that gender equality is not something, diversity is not something that everybody has the privilege to experience. And I'm really grateful to my first years at P&G, but my seminal moment was the day I left.
Yeah, and that
I took it for granted.
That is a great point. And I do, on that point, before we go to questions, you've talked about humanity. When I was at P&G, and Jane, that time you referenced, I was going through a divorce. I had to take my daughter to school, and that made me late every day for the daily management meeting. And the general manager at that time, who is with us here tonight, Krista LaPuente, said, don't even think about it. Take your kid to school. It's the right thing to do. And of course I was embarrassed walking in late to that meeting. Of course I was, but we all got used to it. And then I paid it forward. I let all of my guys fit their work around their lives. And now we fast forward all these decades later, and that has become such a key, important component. So look, you guys have been absolutely awesome. I know we could spend the whole night with you, but I do want to get at least a question. Okay, I'm going to pick a question here from Ramsey. There's wisdom to be gained from the lessons of failure, if not as much or more from success. So what have you learned from your biggest failure? Who wants to go first on that? I don't know. Louisa, you want to kick us off?
Sure, I couldn't agree more. I don't think one learns from success, not even half of what one learns from failure. And I have learned this in recruiting nowadays, particularly in the private equity sector. I think I look for people who have failed and failed well, okay? I think what I've learned from my biggest failure is the power of a cultural context. And I think it's easy when you come from a P&G context to think that, certain values are kind of human values and common sense is kind of common and so on. And I think particularly when you're long at P&G, and I think it's really, really important, in my view, what I've learned is get your context fully understood. And that's what I apply nowadays in investing, for example, with due diligence, the cultural aspects of it. And they are not just nationally driven, they're also nationally driven. And frankly, for somebody who is a bit of a gypsy like me, I tend to underplay national differences because I ride on the commonalities. I think you have to take the time, the patience, and go deep into the cultural whys and historical whys to address them, to drive change effectively and sustainably.
That's a great answer. Paul, what have you learned from your failure?
Yeah, sorry, let me unmute. Yeah, I think the first thing I want to say is probably setting the bar too low, incrementalism. That is, we celebrate a 1% improvement. We should be doing 5 or 10. It takes 257 years, even before COVID, to get gender equality, if you want to, on the WEF index. And COVID, the pandemic itself, has added another 25 or 30 years. So we celebrate incrementalism, we don't make progress. That is really a failure from all of us, myself included. The second thing is that we don't see it comprehensively. At some points in my career, I was so focused on the gender because that was the rallying cry of the day, but you cannot do that and disregard racial, as we have seen with the George Floyd tragedies, or not work on people with disabilities, which are close to my heart. So I've made that same mistake. It has to be inclusive if you want to. And then the third one is ignorance. Most of my mistakes come from ignorance. If I would have listened a little bit more, if I would have understood the situation more, you could have put the right remedies in place. So I'd say those are the three: incrementalism, not holistically looking at it, and being simply ignorant.
So very powerful stuff. Jane, what have you learned from your failures?
Oh, okay. Well, I was going to say to listen more. I think the biggest failures are when you become too attached to an idea and you don't look broadly enough. You don't really listen. You don't listen with empathy. So driving back to your humanistic point, what is active listening? It's not just hearing, it's empathizing. It's putting yourself in someone else's shoes. And I think for me, my biggest failure is when I haven't really developed that empathy. I've just listened, heard, and written it down in my notebook.
So look, we are running out of time. I'm going to ask you like a rapid fire question. Each of you, maybe 30 seconds. What's the one thing you advise our audience to really make sure that COVID does not become a major she session? And just a really quick thing. What do they need to do? I'll start with you, Paul.
As I mentioned already, COVID is very interesting. In some parts of the world, actually, the male employment has gone up, but the female employment has gone down. It has set us back about 10, 15 years on the Sustainable Development Goals. And this is very bizarre because we've discovered, for example, that 70% of the people that are in healthcare and provide services to us, etc., are women. We've also seen that domestic help and, on the other hand, violence and all these issues have gone up. And they are, again, 3 times more unpaid work than paid work. So the most important thing that we now need to do is that as we try to come out of this terrible disaster, as we try to build a society that is more equitable, more sustainable, more inclusive, that in all of the plans that we put in place, with the G20 that I'm working, with the G7, with the COP26 on climate, with the Biodiversity Convention, the Food Summit that is taking place, a very important year, 2021, of an agenda that now the US is back on board. Be sure that in all of these things that we do, that we take the gender aspect not only into account, but actually overcompensate for that. Otherwise, we will never get there. And that's the priority, one of the priorities for myself for 2021. That's
super to hear. So really quick rapid fire answer. One thing to do, Jane, what is it? What do we need to do to
Okay,
avoid...
look, there's many challenges, but I think what we've learned through COVID is there's many opportunities too. So I normally live on a plane, travel 75% of my time. And I think, we've learned in the last year to work flexibly, to work mission-based teams. So I say, let's create a new normal, a better normal, and double down on the things that have worked, that has perhaps surprised many leaders, that can enable more diversity in our work.
Fabulous point. And Louisa, your final top quick tip.
I'll close with a quote from Ingvar Kamprad, the person who probably inspired me most to do things I thought I wouldn't be able to do and do different things. He always said, and that every crisis must make us stronger. That has certainly proven true for IKEA every single time, including this time. And I think it should be the case for us personally, because in crisis, our weaknesses become naked, and it's the moment to address them and drive them, otherwise they kill us, whether that's in business, in a company, in a startup, whether it's you personally, and I think it's for society as well. So let's make sure that this terrible crisis makes us stronger. And I think a few of the topics you both said, I think I agree with, but the mindset I think is super important.
So what doesn't kill us makes us stronger. Some great wisdom. You guys, thank you so much. I wish we had all night. Unfortunately, we don't, and we've got to march on to our next event. A huge thank you for joining us tonight. And I would now, so lots of applause for that awesome panel. I would now like to welcome the two co-chairs of the Women's Leadership Forum, Luann Eckert-Lynch and Deborah Bass. They're going to very briefly share the vision of the Women's Leadership Forum with you, and then conduct a brief survey live to find out more what you'd like. Welcome, Luann and Deborah. Over to you.
Thank you, Anne. First of all, it's such an honor to be talking to this esteemed group and this esteemed panel. So thank you all for signing up for this session and being a part of a very important event, I think, for the Women's Leadership Forum and for the Alumni Network. The Women's Leadership Forum is basically a community within the P&G alumni community. Think about it that way. And you may wonder, why do we exist? And I think it's exactly for some of the things that Jane spoke about earlier. We're not there yet. We need to continue to give back, to help lift, and to lift as we soar, as we all go on to different successful career paths beyond P&G, whatever that might be. So, so for me personally, it's about giving back and making it, bringing equality to life, not in the future, but for now, and also helping those that decide to leave P&G, especially at a younger age, especially which I think is a very diverse population. How do we help them to be successful in their new positions? So basically, I think you could pull up the slide at this point. I have one slide to share. There we go. And this basically outlines who we are. We're a community of high impact women and men from P&G. And we're really thrilled that this audience today includes both women and men. We still think there is a need and for us to help women grow and develop in any career path that they choose. And we know that we can't do it alone. We need to be working together. So with our male partners. So thank you all for being part of us, being part of this group. And we're a force for good. We seek to empower women and promote gender equality, and also give back to the communities that we serve. So that we're entirely a volunteer group. Our board consists of 10 women right now, and we are getting more global every day. We started off very US centric, and we are really working hard to expand our focus, expand our representation from the major areas of the world. And so I think that's making us better, and that's making us
Can everyone still hear Luann?
No, she appears to have frozen, sorry.
I think we may have lost Luann. Deborah, do you want to pick it up until she can rejoin us?
Yes, and I don't know if someone could ping her because I don't know if she realizes that she's frozen. So hi, Deborah, honored to also be here, part of this event. Again, as Luann was saying, we're really a force for good. We're leveraging the full power of the alumni network to engage, to guide, to support women at different stages of career and really helping each achieve whatever goals you might have in your lifelong journey. And in fact, our follow-on questions are really to solicit some of that voice of customer input to understand what's most important to each of you, so we're best poised to serve our community. And I don't know if Luann is back. If Luann's not back in, I might have us jump to the survey. And I'll say if
I think that's fine. You go right ahead.
Okay. And if I say I learned one sort of seminal lesson throughout P&G, right? AG, consumer is boss, right? So we really want to make sure we hear from, understand, and action against what we learn from the community we serve. And that's all of you. So to our survey. And it's 3 consecutive questions. Please answer all 3 and then we'll share the results. And Ann, I'll look to you to pace us for when our results tabulate and are ready to be shared.
And hello,
So
everyone.
I think
I'm
we have
back.
about so we have about 335 participants on the call at the moment, and I'm not sure how many votes we have, but it was 3 simple questions, and I'll ask my events folks how many answers we have, and are we ready to share?
We have 243 out of 330.
Well, that's pretty good. Is that
That
enough
sounds
of a
like
voice?
a statistically representative sample, Ann.
So bring on the answers.
So not surprisingly, Luann and I were sort of hypothesizing last night what would we learn. So not surprisingly, most are not familiar with Women's Leadership Forum, and hopefully sort of our elevator pitch told you more, but we're happy to be reached offline to share more information. In terms of programs that are most important, coaching and mentoring, and that is at the top of our list. But also we see interest in probably workshops on key topics for training, and we can double click there through additional follow-up to tailor the offering there. And then in terms of interest in getting involved at a regional level, Medium, which I believe that there are probably people that would be interested in that follow-up, and maybe we can see who answered hi and chunk those people off to get more involved at a regional level. And Luann, are you back? You lost sound for a moment.
Yes, I'm back.
Okay, so I just sort of carried us into the survey. Maybe you just want to close with our last invitation and push to join our movement.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Deborah. Thanks for backing me up as always. I think pgalums.com, I encourage you all to sign up there. We also have a LinkedIn site, and we currently have 1,900 women in our LinkedIn site and growing. And that's a private site for women and men, but where we highlight topics of interest to P&G women alumni. And we're looking for a new European board member. So if there's anyone interested in joining our board, please contact me. More information will come out in the follow-up email for this event. So all the links and things that you need to do or follow up with will be there. And I really encourage you to, if you have an interest, please come get involved. We'll find a place for you to work what you're passionate about. That's another principle that I have for our team is we're doing things that we want to do to make a difference. it's not a program, not a plan, not an OGSM without meaning for us individually and personally. So we have such a community of great women and men. I know we can make a huge difference in the lives of others around us in our community and our younger women leaving the P&G fold. So thank you very much for your input on the survey.
So that is great. And thank you to both of you for that insight. And what I can say, I've been on the board since just over 6 months. I found it a wonderful experience. I really encourage you to get involved. I'm delighted that actually there are a lot of you interested in doing more regionally. And I'd also like to acknowledge the founder of the Women's Leadership Forum, who is here with us tonight, Ute Hagen. Thank you for your vision. You were ahead of your time. So thanks to Luann and Deborah. We are back on track, folks. So well done on the timing front. Now, our next topic is also one that is very, very relevant for advancement. In fact, 2/3 of CEOs will say that sponsorship is absolutely critical to their success. And yet actually very few women CEOs experience sponsorship. Research that CMI has done with the 30% Club and Russell Reynolds shows that women tend to be over-mentored and under-sponsored. And the difference between sponsorship and mentorship is mentors talk with you, but sponsors really talk about you. And does that matter to be sponsored? And what can we do to change it? Now, here to have a conversation with each other about that topic are a pair of sponsees who have both gone on to stellar careers with a focus on advancing women. Please join me in welcoming Chris de la Puente, who is the chairman of LVMH Beauty and Fragrance and the CEO of Sephora, and Alison Kirkby, who's the CEO of Telia in Sweden, who's now ranked the #1 female CEO in Sweden. Chris was the general manager in Brooklyn's Health and Beauty Care. Alison was the FD. They were sponsee. And I'm going to kick you off with a question and then let you have this conversation with each other. Alison, do you agree that sponsorship is important for CEOs, especially women? And if so, could you maybe share with us the difference that Chris's sponsorship made to you in your career?
Yeah, great to see you, Chris. I see you're still dyeing your hair there. That's fantastic. The hair care business still stays with you.
Fortunately, I can't grow it.
Listen, if it wasn't for Chris and other people in my life, I don't think I would be where I am today. And clearly, you know, what Chris did was we worked out when we caught up 2 days ago that it was 20 years ago when I was in my early 30s. That he spotted this young, rough Glaswegian finance person in the P&G organization and gave me a chance to be his FD, following the footsteps of many grey-haired Scottish men that had gone before me, Chris. And if you recall, I did become the first Western European homegrown P&G finance director. And really what Chris did is he gave me an opportunity. But then what he really taught me and helped sponsor and support me through my time working with him was he encouraged me to move out of my comfort zone. You know, we all know that we were blessed with great leaders at P&G, and leaders like Chris really valued not just growing your business, but growing the people that were in your organization so that they could contribute to the business beyond their legacy. And so Chris, he pushed me out of my comfort zone. I still have in my attic the piece of paper he gave me on my 3rd performance review that said how to be an inspirational leader. And I pull it out every now and again. And he really spent time trying to work out what are the strengths and weaknesses beyond the functional leadership that you brought to the team at P&G. And I think that's what allowed me to extend beyond being a CFO, because Chris could see that there was more to me than just being a CFO, and I had aspirations to go beyond that. So I think, you know, the things that Chris as a sponsor of me did was push me out of my comfort zone, look at what else I could bring to the table, really encourage this team spirit of together everyone achieves more. And he really saw diversity in its broadest sense as well. It wasn't just about the gender piece, and that went on at a later time in our career when Chris put me in to run the Wella UK and Irish business. And that was my first chance to be a general manager coming straight out of finance, and was my excuse to get justified to become a CEO at a later stage. So that's my initial stories of Chris, but I could go on, but I'm sure you all want to hear from him now.
Hi, well, good evening, everyone. Wonderful to see a lot of faces that I haven't seen for a while. I think it's almost 12 years since I left P&G, and it's wonderful to see so many wonderful faces. Look, the story on Alison was very simple, which is I had the privilege and honor of taking over the UK after Paul and Louisa and many others. And we were going through a major reorganization change. And Peter Morris, who was a brilliant CFO at the time, said he wanted to retire in 2000. And we had to pick a new CFO. And so it was, I think you all know, P&G UK was a pretty big business, pretty complex. And the start point was everyone said, well, we need to have someone that's been a proven CFO, international experience, et cetera, et cetera. And I got to see Alison working for Peter. I thought she was bloody brilliant, smart, worked extremely hard, fantastic balance, EQ, IQ, got things done. And I said, why not Alison? I think she was about 35 at the time, or early 30s. But I believed in her. I thought she was fantastic. And she was a role model to the culture that we wanted to create. And so I was prepared to bet on her and help her. And she was fantastic. And I remember we used to do town hall meetings where we'd present the results to everyone. And after a few of these, people used to say to me, wouldn't it be great if other members of the team stood up and presented what's going on? And I asked Alison to do it. And the first time she was a bit nervous presenting in front of the whole organization. By the second and third time, she was so fantastic that she did it without notes. And she was even much better than I was and everyone else. And so she just kept on growing. And every time I would ask her or challenge her to do more, she was up for it. And it's extremely satisfying when you make bets on people and they're hungry to learn and they take on board the feedback and you just watch them fly. And so we don't see so much of each other, but I think it's fantastic how Alison just keeps on growing and growing and growing. And she becomes a role model for a lot of other, young women that want to run companies, and why shouldn't they?
And Chris, have you carried on doing that in your career? Because you were, clearly Procter & Gamble really encouraged us to develop our teams below us. And you were a fabulous sponsor, I'm sure, not just to me, but to many others. What I thought was great about you when you were still at P&G, you continued to sponsor me even beyond the time I was your CFO. You encouraged me to take on a role in investor relations, working between Cincinnati and Europe, so that I could develop my corporate finance skills. And then you spotted the chance that you needed somebody that could understand the hairdressers when you were running Wella, and actually have the right mix of IQ and EQ to handle the British hairdressing industry. Is that something you've continued to do? Look,
I think Paul said it very well. I mean, we don't do this for money. We don't do it for promotion. We do it because we believe it's the right thing. And when you're passionate about it, it just becomes a way of life. It's part of the culture. So I arrived at Sephora 10 years ago, a pretty large organization, a lot of women in the stores and at middle management levels. But when you look at the top 100, there are only about a third of the total population that were women. The leadership team, there was only 1 or 2 women. And after 10 years, 2/3 of the whole organization, of the whole leadership team are women. The board is 50-50. And it's taken a long time to get there, but it's pretty deliberate. And we go after it, we make it happen. We spot, my president of Asia was the merchant in China, chief merchant. I felt she had the potential to go further. So after a few years, I put her in charge of Southeast Asia. She did a fantastic job. And then in last summer, we promoted her to President of Asia. I've got lots and lots of examples like that. It takes time, but we get there. I chair LVMH's beauty business. We have 12 CEOs for all the various brands. We're highly decentralized. 5 years ago, only 2 women. Today, there's 8 out of 12 are female leaders, and all doing brilliantly. And when you start getting women and into these key positions, they tend to recruit. They tend to recruit more. They do a better job at building more diverse organizations. So it becomes systemic, and you continue making progress. So it's great fun, and I think we've become a much stronger organization and a more fun organization as well as a result of these actions.
Yeah, I guess it's great that LVMH have you, Chris. When one of the things I realized after I left P&G was there isn't the same support network and sponsorship. And whereas, the leaders in P&G encouraged, supported, they helped you learn from your failures. Once you're out in the big bad world, there aren't the same quality of leaders. And really what I've learned along the way is I've had to choose my bosses, and now I kind of try to choose my chairman as a CEO, because it's very rare that you get the all-rounded leaders that we had at Procter & Gamble. So like yourself, what I do now is I try to spot talent in the organization, female and male, and particularly when I sit on boards now. I sat on the board of Greggs the Bakers and now sit on the board of BT. Both are actually very male-dominated businesses. And sitting as a board director, I very much try and encourage, why are there not more women sitting around the board table here? And when we go through succession planning, really try and ask the CEO, what are they doing to help those women? Because that's what you did for me, and that's what the chairman did for me that was brave enough to promote me to CEO at Telco back 5-6 years ago. And so do you see consistency in people like yourselves that want to sponsor others?
I think it's all over the place. I think that all companies are making progress. Unfortunately, it's not as fast as it should be. But it just varies very much by individuals. It's got to be led by the top. It shouldn't be led by HR. It should be led by the leadership team, the business, the CEOs, the general managers. As other people have said, what gets measured gets acted on. Leaders have got to be prepared to take risks. And as you take those calculated risks, go out of your way to help people succeed. I went out of my way to help you, and other people have helped me. But I'd say that, gosh, 90% of the risks I've taken on people have worked out. Sometimes I think we underestimate that there's a lot of people with good coaching can get pretty far. If you give them the coaching, they're prepared to learn. We talk a lot about gender diversity today, but I think more could be done on Black and African American diversity. We as LVMH do not do as great a job as should be done there. So we're making progress on gender, on LGBTQI, on Asians, Latinos, but we got to do a much better job in markets like the US on driving representation of Black African Americans at the most senior levels. But you just got to get on with it and just do it. It's not rocket science, but you've got to be intentional about it. And you've got to work on changing the culture. Once you get the culture change, things happen much faster.
I think you also have to encourage the minority, whether it's a female or a Black American or somebody from a poorer background, just to be brave enough to go for it. I think that's what you encouraged in me. And I think because of my working class background, I've always been a bit braver to do things. But that's the thing I find with a lot of women. They're just not get the confidence to tell their boss, I want your job. And they feel almost embarrassed to say that. And I think that's those of us that are here and have been brave enough need to encourage them to just say, don't say no to opportunities. Like you got me the role in Cincinnati when I was 6 months pregnant with Jasper, and they wanted me to go there for 6 months for my onboarding. And I said, I can't come to Cincinnati for 6 months with a baby and leave a 6-year-old at home. But I was brave enough to say, I'll come for a month, but I'll bring the baby and I'll bring my mum with me too.
I remember.
Yeah. And then when I got the opportunity to go to Sweden, my aspiration was to be the CFO of a listed company. And I had the opportunity to be either the CFO of TalkTalk in Shepherd's Bush in London, or the CFO of Tele2 in Stockholm. And all my friends said, well, you got to go to TalkTalk in Shepherd's Bush. And I went, why? And they said, well, because it's in the UK and you can't weekly commute to Sweden. I said, well, Stockholm's much nicer than Shepherd's Bush. And it's a much more interesting job and it will push me much more out of my comfort zone. And so I started a weekly commute by just being a bit braver. And as a result, it led to me then becoming the CEO. So I think that's one thing I really encourage all of those women that I see either in the companies I'm on the board of or those that I still mentor, just take a chance, take a bet, go totally out of your comfort zone, and you never know what might happen out of it. But do it in an environment where you feel safe, because we've all had career mistakes, and I've had one. Unfortunately, it was working for another woman and she wasn't very supportive. But that taught me to choose my bosses or choose my chairman or choose my companies in the future.
I think what you said very well, Alison, in your case is ask for it. I think a lot of people, they underestimate themselves. A lot of women, and this is a gross generalization, but there's always a sense of the glass is half empty. Am I good enough? And on the other hand, you've got a lot of blokes that have a lot of self-confidence and they talk a good story. And all the women I work with, I always encourage them, what do you want? What's your dream? What do you want? What would it take to make it come true? And once you're clear about what people want, you can figure out, how can you help them get there? But you need to speak up. The classic example of when you have a board and it's 50-50, what's the share of voice of women versus men? Generally speaking, the share of voice of men is always double what it should be. And women underspeak, or they only speak when they feel they've got something important to say. Or they start speaking and a bloke interrupts them and says the same thing with a sort of a louder, more forceful voice. And so I think it requires women to speak up. It requires people from LGBTQI communities that may feel a little bit insecure to speak up in big forums, to speak up, say what's on your mind. I mean, everyone counts. Everyone is important. And so I think you've always done that very well. And then I think it's fantastic that the way the chances you've been given, you now inspire others to follow your lead, which is fantastic. And that's how you change the culture. That's why I'm very passionate about working on culture. There's these quotes that in tough times, culture eats strategy for breakfast. I would say in the last year that we've gone through COVID, it's been a disaster for so many people. But our culture at Sephora has been fantastic. The way people have cared for each other, the way people have helped each other. I've been really, really inspired and proud of how people have helped each other, because it's been damn tough. But that comes from working on the culture. And hopefully it'll stay like that for many years and it'll continue to grow.
Yeah. And having a leadership team and a board that comes from a very broad set of experiences. It was great listening to Paul earlier on the BT board. The chairman brought on Paul's head of HR onto the board last year. And, there's not many HR professionals sit on UK PLC boards, but Lena just brings a totally different perspective to the financially salesman, the more traditional board director, because she really forces us to think about people and, as you say, culture. And I think that goes back to having a diversity around you that really complements you as an individual. And we're talking away here. Are you wanting to ask us some questions?
Yeah, so this is amazing. And the comments in the chat are just awesome. And people are saying, can this conversation be available? But you're getting a lot of questions. And we do have time for questions. So I thought I would share some of those with you now. Here's a question from Helen. I think Chris's point re-recruitment is very pertinent. As someone involved in careers coaching students, how has graduate recruitment been impacted by the desire to be more diverse? And obviously, you know, question for Chris and Alison, how can we make recruitment more diverse? Chris?
I don't think it's that complicated. I'm not trying to trivialize it, but in fact, in some ways, it's easier if you work for a company that doesn't promote from within. Because if you need to recruit a new CEO, your brief to the headhunters is, I want a female CEO, just present me female candidates, or a Latino or an Asian, and you become very deliberate on what you want. And don't waste your time interviewing people that aren't on brief. And you just keep, you know, you don't drop your standards. You just keep working and working to find the perfect person that's bang on brief. And so I just be clear on what it is that what you need for the business, and then just go after it. You know, we find, I'll tell you one sort of side story is, one of the biggest transformations we had was in Saudi Arabia. I went there 8 years ago, and the whole Sephora organization was run by men. And there were 3 women in the headquarters sitting in a glass cage, inverted commas, because they weren't allowed to mix. I found it unacceptable. Now, it was very hard for women to work in the country because of regulations, but the door was opening a bit in terms of possibilities. And we decided to be a pioneer, and we decided that we were going to go deliberately recruit more brilliant women. And every year that I went back, there were more and more and more. About 4 years ago, the regulations changed. Today, Sephora in Saudi Arabia is all run by women, and our results are extraordinary. Our shares gone from the teens to 40-odd%. There's so many brilliant women coming out of university that can't get jobs in Saudi companies, some traditional ones. They come knocking at our door, and it's been tremendous. So, I mean, the talent is there. You just got to go and look for it, and you can get a huge competitive advantage if you go fast.
Yeah, for us, Anne, it's you know, it's easier to do the external recruitment, but actually the ICT sector or the TMT sector is very male dominated. So what we try to do is get into the schools, you know, get into the schools and show what a telco company really is, and explain all of the range of opportunities, so that we can then encourage them to go into more scientific, technical type roles at universities. And then, because the more women we can get into ICT interested in university, the more likelihood we then start to have a 50-50 funnel when they start to leave universities. But for us, it does actually start at school.
Yeah, it's a great answer. So here's a question from Anonymous. What does a woman have to do to be spotted? Alison, do you want to kick us off on that one?
Deliver. You know, for me, it was just deliver and be a bloody good employee and a bloody good boss. But and then maybe being Scottish and blonde hair helped as well. I don't know. But
being bolshy.
Yeah, exactly. Just be bold. You know, stand out. Don't be shy.
Ask for it, as you said.
And actually,
Chris, what do you think?
But the thing
I use an acronym that I don't know where I got from, but I got it years ago, which is PI. P for performance. You got to keep on delivering. Deliver, deliver, deliver. I is image. What's your image? And E is exposure. If you have opportunities, go for them. Go for the opportunities that give you exposure. Work on your image and just deliver. And look, Alison is a fantastic example of what's possible, but there's many others that have broken through. And I think it's fantastic that they then set the culture to change the companies that they lead. I mean, we need to have more female minority leaders leading large companies, because they will drive the culture from the top. Now, every time I put a female general manager into China, fantastic woman from Unilever. She's amazing, extraordinary. 3 years later, 90% of my leadership team are women. Now, I think that's a bit, we've gone from one extreme to the other, yeah. But it's fantastic. And our results are extraordinary. They're all Chinese. There's no French, there's no internationals, they're locals. They're hungry like hell, and they are tremendous, and they're doing extraordinary things.
That's
And I think
great.
the other answer is you always stand out when you're in a room of men. In the telco sector, I think there's only 3 female CEOs out of all of the hundreds of telcos globally, which is shocking. So encourage women to go into telco, then they will stand out.
So there's a question here for you, Alison, saying, what are you doing in your telco company to drive change on the gender diversity agenda?
So I've been changing the, luckily I've taken over as CEO in a company that has been driving the diversity agenda for many years anyway. But for me, as I've been changing my leadership team, again, it all starts at the top. So every role I've been searching for, listening to Chris, I try to get 50-50 candidates, 50-50 internal, 50-50 external, and male, female, and then very much encouraging that the next level down has the right mix of women and the next level down, and just being a role model for them.
So that's,
and we have targets. We have targets as well.
Yeah, so it's sort of what gets done. And then there's a question here saying allyship. So allyship is quite a modern, it's different from sponsorship. So do either of you have any insights into how allyship fits into this equation and varies across cultures? Chris, what do you say to that?
I don't have too many examples of that, but I became a sort of ally of the LGBTQI drive in the US. We've made great progress on there, and just understanding what are the barriers to progress. And again, I've sponsored quite a few people for senior roles in the US that have those, I don't know what the right label, those tendencies. And we've made good progress. I sponsor a lot of Asians. I don't think we have enough Asian leaders. And many multinational companies are still very Western-led. And in our industries, one of the biggest engines of growth are the Asian consumers. And I think we could do with greater representation of Asian leaders to understand the cultures even better, so you end up with even stronger plans and stronger organizations.
Yeah, great question. Alison, what do you make of allyship?
Yeah, well, I think certainly my head of HR, I very much encourage her to be looking at what are her peers doing in other companies in the region or in our sector as well, so that we can learn from the best of others. I think if you look at alliances in general, we all as women try to go into other women networks to support others and learn from others. I think men, though, honestly, are better at building these alliances and these networks, particularly if you're a working mother as well. You dedicate so much of your time to work and to your children and family. You probably don't put enough time on doing other things outside. And that's something I regret, because I just don't have the capacity.
Yeah, so a great observation. And here's a question from Anna, and maybe Chris, I'll start with you on this one. She's saying, despite gender diversity being high on the radar for most companies, the reality is that most C-level or board level jobs are occupied by men. And on my level, VP, I often find myself the only female in the room full of men, despite me working in a beauty industry. I know that companies mean well and they want to improve gender diversity, but something isn't clicking. Do you have any insight into what these barriers are and how to address them? Chris, got to start with you on that.
I sort of answered it in, it just takes a long time to change culture, and you need to get momentum. It's one of the hardest things, is walking into organizations where there's not much diversity, and you just got to, you just make progress one step at a time, but, be focused on it. Don't be put off. Be brave. And when I arrived at Sephora, there were a lot of people who were not happy at all with my culture. There were bets as to how long I was going to last. And a lot of those people disappeared within 3 years. But you've just got to be focused on changing the culture. But it's true, there's not enough progress. And it's been very, very slow. But I'd like to think that we will continue to make progress, but we just need momentum. and we need more role models, and then we need more women in high positions to use their power to make even faster change.
Yeah, that's true. And
It
Alison,
starts,
what do you think about
It
that?
starts with the chairman. It starts with the chair of the company. And you know, I was blessed with the chairman of Greg's really believed in diversity. He couldn't find enough qualified female CFOs, and so he took a bet on me even before I'd become the CFO of a listed company to be his audit chair. And so he started at the board, and then he expected his CEO to do the same. And it was the same when I went to Sweden to Tele2. The chairman wanted a female CFO because he wanted to get diversity. And both of those boards were 50-50 boards. And that puts the pressure on the CEO, that puts the pressure on the management team to start the funnel of development that comes up.
So great answer. A question here, which is saying, well, what if you're not the CEO or a board member? You know, how do you go about finding the kind of sponsorship that the two of you have so enjoyed? You referenced the sponsorship culture at P&G, which I think we all felt. How do you go about creating that kind of culture of sponsorship? Chris, what do you think?
I think, look, it doesn't necessarily always have to start as the chairman of a company. You could start off as a general manager. There's a lot of people on this call. You could be a director leading a department. I remember working with Paul in Spain many years ago. He was the general manager, I was the marketing director. We ended up building a really fantastic, diverse marketing organization. I remember going to Turkey, and very male dominated after 3 years. Certainly 2/3 of the marketing department were women. You don't have to wait for the instruction or for permission to come from the top. If you believe in it, you just go for it. And obviously the more senior you are, the more you can change. But I think sometimes it's a bit of an excuse to say, well, the chairman's not going to change. You know, we in LVMH at the board level, we are not as diverse as we should be for whatever reasons, the board of LVMH total, but doesn't stop the various maisons making the progress that they make. You don't have to wait for permission from the top.
So I just want to underscore that with the anecdote I told earlier, Chris, when I was a single mother going through a divorce and had to turn up late for your meeting, and you said, just do it. That had an enormous impact on me. And I paid it forward. And, you know, it really made me wake up to the power of flexible working, the power of people fitting their work around their lives. And you just said, yeah, go for it. So you just did it. And I've been very grateful for that. So that's a great example of that kind of behavior. What would you say, Alison, in creating that kind of culture of sponsorship?
Well, I think for all of us at P&G who really believe in the consumer as boss, we need to, wherever we sit in the organization, encourage our organizations to be as diverse as the consumers or customers we serve. And if we all do that at every level of the organization, that will drive the diversity. And then it's just, you know, just make sure wherever you go. I think once you're in an environment and you believe that diversity is right, you all have a responsibility to push for that. Again, be brave enough to bring in different types of people if you believe it's right to take the business forward. And if you don't, listen, if you're in an organization where diversity isn't valued, then you're probably in the wrong organization.
Yeah, well said.
You can't change it.
Yeah, well, this maybe the last question. You guys have been awesome, but I think I know your answer. If your line manager or boss just doesn't value you or see your worth, what should you do to help you grow and shine within that organization? What would you recommend that this person do? Chris?
I don't have any magical thought. Look, at the end of the day, if you're not getting promoted, if you believe you deserve to do something bigger and you're not making the progress in the company you're in, then you should go and find a job where people are going to appreciate you more. You're going to be more valued. You're going to grow. Don't end up being stuck in a place. You've only got one life, and go and work for people that value you more and appreciate you, and they'll grow you. I mean, it sounds very easy to say that, but I think too many people just get stuck in places and they become victims. Don't be a victim. Take charge of your career and go for it. I mean, that's very easy to say that if you've got a family dependent on you. But I wouldn't put up with it. You should do a job that you love and work with people that you want to work with and work with people that want to help you grow.
Super. And Alison, what do you say to that?
I totally agree. And it's not always easy to be brave enough to leave when you find you're in an environment that's not getting the best out of you. As you get older, you learn to be braver. And my latest motto in life, my main motto is have a dream, make it come true. My latest motto though is if it's not fun, fuck it.
And on that note, I mean, we can't possibly top that, can we? So
that's why we made a CFO of the UK.
Yeah,
a huge boom boom to Alison and Chris. A huge thank you. It's been an awesome conversation. I know everybody's loved it. Alison for president in the chat. Both of you for Chris for vice president. There you go. But thank you guys. You've been absolutely awesome. I know everybody's really enjoyed this. So thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Lovely to see you.
Yeah, great to see all of you. Thank you, Anne.
So we are coming up to the next portion of our journey. We still have some stellar events. I hope you're enjoying tonight, but within the next few weeks and months. And if you've enjoyed tonight, please do sign up for P&G alums and the P&G Women's Leadership Forum. You'll find the links in the chat, and you will also see them on your invite for tonight. And you will see them again on your program, and you will see them in the follow-up email. So some really important coming up events, but don't leave us yet because we've got some superb parts to end the evening. But do save the date for November 12th and 13th, when the Global Alumni Conference will be a spectacular and groundbreaking hybrid event. So very on point with the post-COVID culture, accessible from across the world. And closer to home, do sign up for EMEA President Loic Tassel's annual address to the alumni community next Tuesday, February 9th. But now, in what you've all been waiting for, are spectacular events that I'd like to bring up, and they take us back to what I said in the introduction. There's so many different kinds of leadership, so many different highly accomplished female and male alumni doing great things for gender equality, and you can find out how they do it. Here's your chance. We have a series of workshops for you that you can join. You can choose to join How to Progress Gender Balance from the C-Suite, featuring Gabi Schupp, whom I had the privilege of working with in Germany when we launched Always Together. She's now the CEO of Tableware at Villeroy Boch. Helen Warren-Piper, who is the general manager of Mars Pet Care UK, and Gabi Hessig, who is still with P&G, again, another always colleague, and is now the managing director for communication and sustainability, who's going to update you on what Procter & Gamble's doing. You can also join How to Be an Entrepreneur, How to Start Your Own Business, and learn about 3 critical success factors with Olesya Nazarova, the founder and CEO of Parental, a sustainable clothing company, and Katrin Seifarth, the founder of the very successful company Train Effect. You could also join How to Be a Thought Leader with Gill Whitty-Collins, the consultant, executive coach, and author of Why Men Win at Work, and Helen Tupper, who's the co-founder and CEO of Amazing If, and podcaster, and also author of the best-selling Squiggly Career. And definitely, last but definitely not least, you could join How to Be Board Ready, led by Elke Benning-Rohnke, the entrepreneur, multiple board member, founder of FIDAR, and a top voice in LinkedIn in Germany, and the awesome Roisin Donnelly, portfolio non-executive director, and former Just Eat and Holland and Barrett board member. So the links to join these workshops, which last a half an hour and are interactive, are in the chat. They're also in your invitation email. Please join at least one. You can also skip around, but they only last a half hour. So please do join those workshops. And if I may, let's end on a high. We will, after those events, have some optional networking hosted by our fabulous chapter heads and some of our speakers. And if you're interested in joining anything, please note the links in the chat and also in your joining up email. So this is the end of the plenary session. I want to thank you all for joining us. And if I could say, here's to making an impact together on this incredibly important leadership agenda of gender equality, of humanity, of empathy, of just being a decent and inclusive human being, and working together with each other as P&G alumni to face the vital issues that we face in leadership in the world today that are made more important than ever by the COVID crisis. And to leave you with this thought as you join these workshops, as someone once and very recently said to me, think positive and test negative. So thanks for joining us and see you in the workshops. Take care.